Welcome back to the channel. Today I wanted to do something a little bit different and talk about how COVID affected me and my experience having COVID. I think it's important to explain to people what it's actually like, or what it can be like for people who are infected. Now, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm not looking for anything other than just me explaining what happened to me to try and prevent it from happening to other people. So, if you're one of those people to say, oh, it's fake, it's not real, I'm just going to block you from my channel, because all that is doing is disrespecting me, because I experienced it and I went through it and I know that it's real. And I don't want to have those petty little arguments with people who don't understand how devastating COVID can be. Now, I do want to say everything I'm about to talk about is quite intense. It's quite deep. It might seem like an upsetting video, but I do implore you to watch it all the way through. I won't put any mid-roll ads or anything like that, so that people can just sit and listen. And I also want to add that I believe I am still very lucky in my experience, even though it was probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me in my life, and the worst experience I've been through in my life, and probably for a very long time, will be the worst thing I've ever experienced. So way back when it was first being announced and people were worrying about it, 2 weeks before the first official lockdown here in the UK, I quarantined, and I haven't left my house once since then. I haven't left my house since the end of January. I've stayed in my house, in my room, away from everyone. So how did I catch it? Well, my dad still needed to work, and he's a taxi driver. And for 6-7 months, went out, worked, came back, everything was sterilized, clean, and all that kind of stuff. One day he came back obviously asymptomatic, and when his symptoms started to show for him, I and my mum had probably already caught it and contracted it and was just waiting for the symptoms to take hold. My dad had it for about 3 days and was relatively okay. My mum was extremely lucky because she's obviously very high risk due to fighting cancer twice in her life, one very recently too. She had it for about 5 days, 4 or 5 days. I was sick for 22 days. It really, really knocked my life apart, and it knocked me for 6. Of those 22 days, probably about 3 of them were pre-symptoms, kind of just feeling a little bit off, and about 2 of them are after all the symptoms had gone and kind of just recovering over the physical symptoms that were happening to me. But all throughout that time, every day it got progressively worse and more intense and devastating. All the symptoms that I had were getting worse and worse and worse every single day. It took a very long time for me to kind of turn, and when I turned and was getting better, it was like 2-3 days it all cleared up. Well, not cleared up, but to the point where I could get out of bed and move around. And being autistic as well means I feel anxiety and stress on a more impactful level to me. So having something like COVID and knowing that it can kill people really also affected my mental health a lot worse than it probably should have for a normal person, or a neurotypical person, I should say. I was devastated, worrying, stressed, anxiety all around COVID, as well as just the emotional and mental distress that COVID causes anyway. Most days I couldn't even think straight, I couldn't even think properly, and that really worried me because my brain has always been something that I've trusted and relied on, and it just was gone completely through the symptoms of COVID. So I know I'll probably forget something, or I won't explain it to its fullest, but these are kind of the symptoms that I had. I had a lot of physical pain. If you look at the flu, because everyone compares it to the flu, COVID is like the flu times 10. Now, some people will have it for 2 days or 3 days and think that it's not that big of a deal, but just because it doesn't affect you or you don't get sick from it doesn't mean that it doesn't really, really affect some people. The physical pain that I was feeling, if you think about something like the flu, you get aches, you get pains and stuff like that. For me with COVID, it was like, the only way I can explain it is that my limbs, my legs, my arms were kind of twisted around, so they were the opposite way in pain, and then I was being forced down and pressured down into my bed, and everything just felt heavy, and I couldn't move or breathe most days, and the pain was just immense throughout my arms and my legs. I had to really lie completely still most days to negate the effects of the pain. And I had incredibly bad headaches as well, in terms of internal pain. Probably the worst thing for me was the cough. The cough was incredibly coarse and just horrible and consistent, and I would have aggressive coughing fits. Now for me, if I'm lying in bed I'm fine. I don't cough once. As soon as I move, so if I turn over, roll over, go to the bathroom, anything like that, I will go into a coughing fit, which would last like 15 minutes straight. Phlegm, coughing up, just the worst type of cough that you can think of. And that happened for 20 days straight. And by the end of the 20 days, I was just absolutely exhausted from coughing. It was terrible. I couldn't sleep at night because of the cough. Obviously, if I'm turning around in bed, moving around, you know, my cough goes off crazy. So for like 20 days, I was getting like 1-2 hours sleep a night at most. So I was basically running on fumes for the entire time. And when you are fighting something like COVID, you want to be as rested as possible, but I just couldn't rest. It was like torture. That's what it was like. That's the best way I can explain. It was like torture. You know, at nighttime, my temperature would go up as well. So I was having nightmares when I was asleep. And I was also having hallucinations. I'd see shadowy figures walking around my room by me, which, you know, scared the out of me, and I'm not going to swear, but it scared me. It made me fearful, and I'm never usually like that at all. And it really, really affected me because of everything else that was going on with COVID and all the symptoms that I was having. This extra thing of like a hallucination was really, really impactful and scary. You know, my temperature throughout the day would change constantly and consistently. So within an hour's time, I would have different temperatures, or the effects of what my body would be like would change several times. So at one point I could be shivering, one point I could be sweating hot. I'd have to keep taking jumpers off, putting them on, stuff like that. So, you know, I know that happens with the flu as well, but this was happening like every 5 minutes. It was just changing. So it was just knocking me around. Like there was no one consistent thing. It was just chaos and mayhem within my body and within my brain. You know, I think about 3 or 4 times my temperature reached over 40 degrees Celsius, which is around about 104 Fahrenheit, I think, for you US people, which obviously is incredibly dangerous. But I didn't want to go into hospital because if I was going to die or anything really bad happened, I didn't want to be alone in a hospital. I'd rather just be in my bed, you know, around like my mum, because my mum was here obviously too. So you know, it was a very scary time. Like I remember one night just waking up and walking into my mum's room, absolutely breaking down in tears and crying, and just saying to her, I don't want to die, because that's how bad it got. Like it was just terrible. Through this time as well, I couldn't eat because I had nothing in me to eat, and I lost 10.5 pounds within those 20 days, which is close to a stone in weight if you're here in the UK. And that was quite terrifying as well, because I was losing weight at a rapid time, especially when I needed to eat and needed to, you know, be as healthy as possible to fight something like COVID. Losing that much weight obviously made things a little bit worse too. I'm happy that I've lost the weight. No, I'm just kidding. I'd rather have lost the weight healthily. But yeah, that really impacted me. It really made me think, Jesus Christ, if I had this for any longer than 22 days, I could have been in some real serious trouble. You know, my emotional structure and everything I've learned over the past 2 or 3 years to kind of build myself up to be a mentally and emotionally healthy person, COVID just tore that apart. Most days I was crying, you know, I was believing that I was going to die every minute of the day. And the stress and anxiety that I felt, like it was nothing I've ever experienced before in my life. And I've been through a lot of stress and anxiety throughout my life. So that was scary in itself. Loneliness was a massive part of it as well. Like I've not really had much social life within my life. I haven't had many friends, and now I have less than I've ever had before in the past. But to have COVID and just be stuck in your room, you know, people can't come in, having no one to talk to, not being able to distract yourself with anything because you can't, it was extremely lonely. And that was scary to me because I thought I'd had a handle on loneliness and feeling lonely and understanding that feeling. But that really shook me up when I started to realize how lonely I was, especially with the thought that I might die. You know what I mean? Like it's a strange sensation to feel and experience. And it just felt like it would never end. Like I would never get better and I'd just be sick forever unless I died from it. And, you know, some days I was genuinely wishing that I would die just so I didn't have to experience it anymore, because it was just that emotionally, mentally and physically devastating. You know, once I got better, I started to notice some after effects. The main one for me was it has affected my lungs to the point where I'm breathless walking to the bathroom, which is about 10 steps out of my door. Walking up and down the stairs, I would get extremely breathless. Even walking outside the front door, and roads and streets and gardens aren't that big in the UK, I would be absolutely breathless. And I still am. Even a month later, I still have that breathlessness, and I still know that my lungs have been affected by COVID. Having a new puppy has helped quite a lot, even with the emotional and mental scarring from COVID. Having this puppy around has really distracted me, but also, I don't know, made me feel kind of happy and love for the dog. But it's also helping me with the breathlessness and getting my stamina up, because obviously you chase around a little puppy because it's a nightmare. But because of the effects that it had on me mentally and emotionally, I just lost direction. Like, prior to COVID, I'd had my diagnosis of autism a couple of years ago. I was working on myself. I'd got to a point where I'd made big life decisions and choices, and COVID took all those away from me because I couldn't go to university and stuff like that. So I came back to YouTube, and I thought, okay, I can do YouTube for a year, 2 years, whatever, however long I need to do it. And then I can quit it on my own terms, because last time I quit, it wasn't really on my terms. And then after COVID, I just lost all kind of determination and motivation to do videos. It really changed something in me. It took something away from me in that regard. And that's why I kind of really stopped making videos. Every now and again, I'd upload a video when I kind of felt in the right headspace. But recently, I just haven't felt in the right headspace, and I don't truly know if I'm going to continue YouTube or not. I've thought about making a Minecraft channel because I love Minecraft. It's the most chill game in the world, and I feel like I could probably just sit back and play that every day and record it. But that's another video down the line, maybe, potentially. But making videos on every little thing in every little game, like, oh, how to find this, where to find that, let's do this, let's do that, it's just not something I can keep up with right now. I might make some like PvP live content, stuff like that, but it's COVID really, really, really took something away from me as it came to content creating and YouTube and stuff. And that's a shame, really, because obviously I quit the first time and it was out of my control, really. And now I feel like it's happening again, and that sucks. That's caused me a lot of anxiety and stress. I'm trying to push through. I'm trying to push on. Maybe, I need an extra month or something, and then I'll be in a better headspace to make some videos. But, COVID has really just tore everything apart for me, and just, I don't know. Now as well, I'm also like incredibly anxious of catching it again, because there's no real evidence that you can't catch it again. But there's also mutated strains of COVID as well. And what if I catch one of them? And the amount of anxiety and stress I feel for that, because I know what I went through, is just so intense and so crazy that it makes me fearful every day. It's scary. It really is. I genuinely don't know if I could handle it again. Like, I've been through a lot in my life. I consider myself to be quite a strong-headed person, but COVID just really opened me up to like a whole new experience, and how pain and anguish and anxiety and stress can affect you. It's been crazy, and I'm probably missing like 50% of the story, but yeah, it was hard. Let's just put it that way. It was hard. People who think it isn't real because they haven't caught it, or because they only had it for 2 or 3 days, consider yourself to be on the most extreme scale of lucky, because it could be so much worse. And I consider myself lucky because other people have died from it. People have lost their family members. It's devastated the economy. This thing is real. Just because you haven't experienced it, or you experienced it in a very minimal quantity, doesn't mean it's not real. And those who haven't had it, who think it isn't real, I pray to God that you never have to have it, because even though it will prove to you that it is very much real, I wouldn't want anyone, and I mean absolutely anyone, there's some people in this world that I hate with a passion, I would not wish this upon them, because it is absolutely awful. So I guess the last thing I can say is wear a mask, practice social distancing, wash your hands as much as possible, as often as possible, because even if you don't care about getting it, if you don't think it's real or whatever. These are very small little things that you can do to prevent other people from experiencing what I went through or worse. You know, wearing a mask, cleaning, social distance. You may have COVID but not have any symptoms and then pass it on to someone. That could be someone random in the street. It could be someone you love. It could be your parents. Just protect other people if you don't care about protecting yourself. Wear a mask, clean your hands, wash your hands, social distance, please. I don't want anyone to go through what I went through. And like I said, I'm lucky. Thank you for watching. I've been easynow. You guys have been awesome.